Hey, once again, it's Dean the General from Three of a Kind with another tier list. Part 1 of Pink Floyd. We're going to look at all their studio albums, touch on a couple of live ones, and start with an EP. 1967, the first 3 singles, was released in 1997. The debut album, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, featured the original lineup and is now considered a classic. David Gilmour became his replacement, and they released the album A Saucerful of Secrets in 1968. During 1969, Pink Floyd released 2 albums. The first was the soundtrack to the film More, while Ummagumma was comprised of both live tracks and some new studio recordings. In 1970, the band released Atom Heart Mother, their first #1 in the UK. 1 year later, they released the landmark album Metal, followed by another soundtrack, Obscured by Clouds, probably their most underrated album ever. 1973 saw the release of their most famous album, Dark Side of the Moon. It was #1 in many countries around the world. A 1974 performance of the album in Wembley was released 2023. Faced with the daunting prospect of following it up, they came up with another winner, 1975's Wish You Were Here. In 1977, Animals came out. It is perhaps their greatest album, featuring Richard Wright as a full-time member for the last time until the 1990s. Before the decade ended, Pink Floyd released the famous double album, The Wall. Much like Dark Side of the Moon and to a lesser extent Wish You Were Here, it was a massive success. 1983 saw the release of the last album with Roger Waters. The final cut was a disappointment overall. 4 years later, A Momentary Lapse of Reason was released. It featured Gilmour and Nick Mason along with studio musicians. A year later, they released the live album, Delicate Sound of Thunder. In 1994, the band finally released another studio album called The Division Bell. Wright was back in the band, more or less. Pink Floyd's last studio album, The Endless River, was released in 2015, several years after Wright had died. Check out Three of a Kind for other tier lists and videos on mostly pop, rock music. Subscribe, comment, like, and thanks again for watching.